Hello and welcome to the Sceptic Takeout Christmas special. We all know the Christmas story, how Jesus was born in a manger, the three wise men, the shepherds and the star. But what does the Bible actually say about it? Is the story we learn at school accurate? Well, they're going to find out on this Sceptic Takeout Christmas special. It's Christmas, so although we're going to be sticking to our usual high standard of critique, it's going to be a little more light-hearted and tongue-in-cheek than usual. Hit the like and subscribe buttons, share the love, and sit back for the authentic Christmas story. Today we're going to be keeping it seasonal by looking at the story of Jesus' birth. In the New Testament, only two writers tell us anything about the birth of Jesus. They are Matthew and Luke. Matthew tells us that when Joseph and Mary are engaged, she falls pregnant. This, rather understandably, somewhat annoys Joseph, who believes that she's still a virgin. It all turns out fine though, because he has a dream where he is told that it was the Holy Spirit who done it, so they get married and out comes little baby Jesus. Then along come some wise men who, for some unknown reason, presumably because they are wise and we're not, think it's a good idea to follow a star to Jerusalem. When they get there, they ask where the King of the Jews is going to be born, and King Herod tells them that he is to be born in Bethlehem. The wise men then follow the star, who, it seems, was good enough to wait for them to make enquiries. Hang on a minute. Some wise men follow a star. This implies that the star knows where it's going, to Jerusalem. It then waits while they make enquiries about where to go next, and once they have received the information, they then follow the star to Bethlehem. Is this an ancient sat-nav? Do the wise men have to input their destination before they set off? Why didn't the star lead them straight to Bethlehem? Anyway, once they get to Bethlehem, the star, which is apparently sponsored by one of the big satellite navigation brands, stops over the house of Joseph and Mary. The wise men then offer Jesus some gifts and then go home. Herod, despite having told the wise men where to find little Jesus, then decides that he's the only king and he doesn't want a new king of the Jews to be born, so he orders all the boys under 2 near Bethlehem to be killed. Why under 2 rather than newborns when Jesus has only just been born is a mystery. Maybe he's just making sure? So Joseph has another dream in which he's warned about King Herod's dastardly plan. So he takes Mary and Jesus and leaves for Egypt. Now, this is interesting. We are not told whether or not he informs the parents of other boys under 2 about this planned massacre so they can also flee. You would hope so, but that detail is not deemed important enough for Matthew to relay it. One would assume that he did though, as there is no record whatsoever of Herod slaughtering children in Bethlehem. Having said that, neither is there any record of a load of parents taking their male children under 2 out of Bethlehem. So that aside, they arrive in Egypt, spend some time doing Egypty things. Then they hear of Herod's death, conveniently fitting with Hosea 11:1. So they think it's safe to return, because you guessed it, Joseph has a third dream. That is until they realise that Herod's son is now king, and Joseph has another dream, telling them to go to Nazareth in Galilee instead. This, Matthew tells us, will fulfil what was said through the prophets. Did you get that? Good. So, what does Luke's story tell us about the birth of Jesus? Luke begins with the angel Gabriel telling Zechariah that his wife Elizabeth, spoiler, soon to be mother of John the Baptist, who is Jesus' cousin, is going to have a baby, despite being infertile. Not to be left out, Mary also has a visit from Gabriel, telling her that she will have a baby. But Mary goes one better by being told she will give birth to the Son of God and he will reign forever. And of course, in possibly the first account of Keeping Up with the Joneses, as soon as she hears this news, she rushes to Elizabeth to let her know. Okay, so just a quick note here. At the time, the Son of God had two distinct meanings. For the Greeks and Romans, it meant literally a son of a god. For example, Hercules was the son of Zeus. For the Jews, the term referred to someone who had a special relationship with God and the Jewish kings of old. You with me so far? Right, good, let's carry on. Augustus, the Emperor of Rome, decides that there should be a census and everyone has to return to their ancestral home to register. Joseph and Mary then go to Bethlehem to register, but there is no room for them at the inn. So Mary ends up giving birth to Jesus and laying him in a manger, which is essentially a feeding trough for animals. Meanwhile, an angelic host go and tell a few shepherds that the Messiah was born in Bethlehem, so they go to Jesus and worship him. Just over a week later, Jesus is presented at the temple and Joseph and Mary make a sacrifice to God. While they're at the temple, a man called Simeon and a woman called Anna recognize Jesus as a Messiah, and then they return to Nazareth. So, these are the two New Testament accounts of Jesus' birth. Matthew tells us of the wise men and doesn't tell us of the shepherds. Luke tells us of the shepherds and mentions nothing of the wise men. Matthew's Joseph and family leave Bethlehem via Egypt and a jealous king, and Luke takes us to Bethlehem due to an empire-wide Roman census. Matthew has Joseph communicated to via dreams, and Luke has angels chatting away to Mary. Further to the internal inconsistency of these two accounts, if we were to do some historical fact-checking, what would we find? As we have already touched upon, there is no record of King Herod slaughtering the children, and we have no record of any census ordered by Caesar Augustus that required anyone to register in their ancestral home. Even if there was, it would be a huge logistical undertaking. As Professor Bart Ehrman points out in his book, Jesus Interrupted, Joseph returns to Bethlehem because his ancestor David was born there. But David lived 1,000 years before Joseph. Are we to imagine that everyone in the Roman Empire was required to return to the home of their ancestors from 1,000 years earlier? We have one story where Jesus is born in Bethlehem and another where Joseph and Mary arrived at Bethlehem, which suggests that the place itself may have some significance. Why is that? We will examine this question shortly. Going back to our historical fact-checking, what about our star? Do we have any candidates for this in the records? Well, yes and no. There are two events often thought of as the most likely candidates for the Star of Bethlehem. The first is a rare conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn, which occurred in May, October and December of 7 before the Common Era. Tim O'Brien, Associate Director of Jodrell Bank Observatory, said in a 2012 article from the BBC that such a conjunction ticks all the boxes. It would appear very bright in the night sky and would even appear to change direction from the perspective of Earth. This is by no means a new idea. German astronomer Johann Kepler was the first to suggest that this rare conjunction could be what was mistaken as the Star of Bethlehem in 1614. And considering this event happens on average every 800 years, it just so happens that we're due another one soon. Very soon. Very, very soon. In fact, I was originally planning on releasing this video on Christmas Eve, but I brought it forward because on December the 21st, this rare astronomical event will be taking place for the first 800 years. I wanted to give my subscribers a chance to see it for themselves. See the links below for a guide on how best to observe this event. The second most popular explanation is that the wise men actually followed a comet. In 5 before the Common Era, a bright comet was recorded in the constellation of Capricorn by Chinese astronomers. Interestingly, this one seems to have caught the public imagination, with some greeting cards now including a comet as the Star of Bethlehem. So do we have historical evidence of the Star of Bethlehem? Well, no. As attractive as these explanations are, and there are many more than the 2 I've just touched upon, they're really just drawing a target around the arrows. We don't have any sources that match Matthew's description of a sat-nav star, and as we're about to see, what is agreed upon in two accounts could suggest that the stories contain literary devices in order to make sure that the birth of Jesus happened at just the right place. Matthew wanted to stress how Jesus was eligible to be called the King of the Jews, or as Daniel J. Harrington puts it, stressing the Jewishness of Jesus. So he gave Jesus a lineage, connecting him through King David to Abraham, and a virgin birth to fulfill the prophecy of Isaiah, as well as fitting the narrative in Hosea. Luke's account seems to stress to us that while John the Baptist is a figure of reverence, he pales in comparison to Jesus, who is not just born of a virgin, but also the Son of God. Luke wants Jesus to be a light for all the people of the world, so he extends his genealogy all the way back to Adam, the father of mankind. Both authors have Jesus born in Bethlehem, and this, as well as stressing the genealogy of Jesus, is used to legitimize Jesus in the eyes of people familiar with Micah and Isaiah and Hosea. Matthew himself stresses this in verse 122, where he says, "All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet." In conclusion, it seems that our school nativity stories were a construct of the 2 New Testament accounts, taking parts from Matthew, parts from Luke, and leaving some parts out altogether. And clearly, the stories themselves were written not as a historical account of the birth of Jesus, but as a literary tool to legitimize Jesus into the prophetic texts that had preceded him. Share the Christmas love with my friends, who can be found in the links in the description. Go out and watch yourself an 800-year astronomical event and have a very, very Merry Christmas. See you all next year. Matthew wanted to stress. Matthew.